Hello and welcome to this week's Luke Lunchtime Takeaway. Week by week we're going through Luke's Gospel and we're looking at some of the big issues of faith and what it means to follow Jesus. This week I want to deal with this big question: is faith a leap in the dark? You see, some people say that faith is this enormous leap from the rational world up into the world of the spiritual and the irrational and the world we can't see. And you have to have this huge leap of faith to get up there. This is the worldview that's operated for about the last 200 years since the Enlightenment. The view that says, look, we can observe the world that we can see. It's a rational world. We can study it. We can examine it scientifically. We can read history. We can study facts. We can establish by human reason everything we can see here in the world. But we can't see God. We can't see whether there is eternal life. We can't know about such things. Therefore, to believe in God, to believe in the supernatural, requires a great big leap of faith. And people would say, therefore, Christianity is a great leap of faith and I can never do it, is what a lot of people would say. I just haven't got that kind of faith. And we've talked about this before. I want to say that Christianity is not about us puzzling out in our own minds by our own reason whether God exists or not. Christianity is about God intruding from the supernatural realm into the world that we can see and acting in history. And we have to come to terms with those claims as they are made in the Bible. We're going through Luke's Gospel. We're looking at the sayings of Jesus, the miracles of Jesus, and we're looking at who he is and what it means to believe in him. And we're in Luke chapter 8. And remember that Luke is a gospel that's been written for us, Luke says, so that we can know the certainty of the things that we believe. He has checked out the eyewitnesses of these events and he's recorded his account so that we can have certainty about what we're believing. This is not fable and myth. This is thoroughly reliable. And at the end of chapter 8, Luke introduces us to two characters who meet Jesus. In both cases, they put their faith in him, but in both cases, their faith is challenged. Their faith is weak. But they put their faith in the person who will never, ever disappoint them. And so the focus is not on the strength of their faith, that they've got this ability to make this giant leap of faith. No, actually, it's probably the tiniest step of faith in their lives. But they are putting their confidence in the one who has the power to change them. The first of these characters is called Jairus. He was a synagogue ruler in Galilee, in one of the towns of Galilee. He was a very significant religious person and presumably quite well-to-do. And he had a 12-year-old daughter, and his daughter fell ill. So he came to Jesus and he threw himself down in front of Jesus and pleaded with him to come and heal his daughter. So Jesus sets on his way with Jairus, and the crowd is big and the streets in the town are narrow, and so you can imagine it takes quite a long time for the crowd to get through the gap ahead of him and for him to get down the street and make any progress. Now, while they're travelling, at the side of the street is a lady and she's sat down. And this is how Luke describes her. There was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, on doctors, she could not be healed by anyone. Just imagine what she's going through. For a dozen years, she has suffered probably with endometriosis, which is extremely painful and undignified and awful to live with. And her life has been wretched. And she hears about Jesus and hears that he is healing people. So suddenly she has Jesus as her last hope. And she comes up behind Jesus in the crowd and she just reaches out a hand and touches the hem of his garment. And the moment she does that, immediately she feels her body is changed. The bleeding has stopped. The pain is gone. She knows that she's been healed. Not only that, Jesus knows. And he says to his disciples, hang on, who touched me? And the disciples say, Jesus, you're in a crowd, in a narrow street. Of course people are touching you. And Jesus said, but hang on a minute. Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me. Jesus knew that somehow miraculous power through him had been able to heal this particular woman. And so the woman is found and she's brought to the feet of Jesus and she tells her story. And she is so thankful to Jesus. And he simply says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." It's a wonderful moment, isn't it? Her faith is weak. She could only just reach out to touch the hem of his garment, and immediately she is healed. Now, of course, Jesus is still walking down the street with Jairus, and they're trying to get to his house in the midst of all this commotion. And then comes news, and it's bad news. Jairus' daughter is dead. And so the messenger says, "Don't trouble the master anymore. It's too late." And Jesus answered him and said very clearly, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." He's challenging Jairus to fix his faith in Jesus. Doesn't matter how weak or how strong his faith feels. Just trust me, he says Jesus, and she will be well. And so when he reaches the house, there are lots of professional mourners there, and they are crying and sobbing and full of tears. And he says to them, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." The professional mourners who are meant to be crying are laughing at the very thought that she might only be asleep. But Jesus takes her parents and Peter, James and John, 3 of his disciples, and they go into the room. Luke tells us, verse 54, "But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, 'Child, arise.' And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given to her to eat." Jesus was able to break the power of death in Jairus' daughter's life. Later on, Lazarus will die and be buried, and Jesus will command him to come out of his tomb, and he will be raised. And Jesus himself will die and be buried, and on the third day he will rise again, for he has the power to break the power of death. Christian faith is not about a leap in the dark. It's not about us having great strength to believe. These two characters tell us that even though your faith is weak, it's the person you trust in that matters. Our faith is not a leap into some unknown realm. It's about that unknown realm intruding into time, coming where we are, in the person of Jesus, the light of the world shining into our darkness, to make God known to us and to bring us back to him. If you'd like to know more about exploring that, we run a course called Life Explored. We'd be very happy to run that again. Just drop us an email to the email that appears on the screen, and we'll get in touch with you and tell you more. Thank you for joining me. Join me again next week when we'll look at the next chapter of Luke's Gospel.